Everybody, welcome back to Final Resonance TV and episode number 49 of Van Halen Stories. Today, my guest, all the way from Brighton, England, is my good friend, Jay Parmar. Jay and I met years ago. Jay is kind of like my YouTube guru. He has been my helper. He's the guy that first reached out and helped me and got this channel started. And went for Jay, I don't know what I'd be doing. So thank you, Jay, for being here, part
Oh,
of Van Halen Stories, man. And
most,
yeah, it's a crazy journey that we've been on. It's probably been what, 6 or 7 years ago that happened.
yeah, it was 2018,
Was it
and
Nam?
yeah, it was Nam because I know that because my beard is that old. I blame you for my beard, which I love. And, I love
Well,
having this beard.
we had an awesome time in California that year, and one of the things we did was the Van Halen Trail. Which, if you watch my channel, you'll see the Van Halen Trail. If you go to the Van Halen playlist, there's a couple different ones. One is for the actual episodes here, but also for like a historical background of the. It's called the Van Halen Historical Playlist, and it has all these Van Halen pilgrimages that we did over the years, and he did, and I did early on. Like before you and I did it, I had gone out there and seen the home and done some small versions of that. But then when you and I we started to do it, we did a lot more locations
Yeah,
for the trail, and that's when it kind of was born as the Van Halen Trail that year because you posted on your channel the same
right. Yeah,
tour, right? And
that's right. Yeah,
so
we both.
Jay's channel, it's Jay Palmer, guitarist, right?
Yeah, it's Jay Palmer Guitarist. They can go to youtube.com at jguitar, Jay guitar, and find me in all the crazy stuff that I do on there and
Right.
stuff, which
Well,
is kind of
Jay,
cool.
as you see, Jay has a litany of guitar amps that he builds a lot of them himself. Guitars that he's built himself. Show him some of the Van Halen things you've done, like some of
Um,
the modifications. Now, Jay does a lot of modifications and builds that are really cool uh, and unique. And he's really into all the gear too. And so that's one of the reasons I want to bring him on here and see all the stuff he's got.
one that I did build.
You built that yourself, yeah.
I did,
Awesome.
yeah. My Frankie, I got lucky with this a few years ago. I think it was like 2020 or something. It was like a few days before, it was about a week before Christmas, actually. I think it was 2020 or 21, whenever it was, right? So I'm kind of just surfing on eBay, right?
Yeah.
And I see this body, and I'm looking at it, and I could see the wood grain in it, so I knew it was a good piece of body. Person said that it was made of ash and stuff. It was like about $200. So
Right.
like, wait, this is like $200. So I just nabbed it and got it, and it turned up like on the 23rd of December. And then, plan was obviously to do a Frankie guitar and stuff. But this was a cool build because I personalized it. It's not like a complete accurate replica because the quarter on it, it has my birth year on it, which is 73, which,
That's
I
a
love.
cool idea.
Yeah, I figured, I could put the 71 in there, but then it was like, yeah, I've got a 73 actually. That would make much, much more sense.
Right.
And things like, I cut down the heel because this is what works for me and stuff like that. And
Right. Right.
I like doing stuff like this, but this was a major build, and I love playing this guitar because, it's the whole Van Halen thing, of course. But,
I think 2020 we did a lot of us did that. That's what the black and white behind me. I did that as a
yeah,
tribute, in 2020 after his passing, and I think a lot of us built guitars after that.
yeah, I think it pushed us into actually kind of taking some action and saying, you know what, I need one of these, just to. I guess we were all in that place where it was like, what, Eddie's what,
Right.
and
Right. Right.
I remember for a time that even the Wolfgang guitars, the prices hiked up and stuff. People are selling them and stuff and whatever else. And at the time, I was kind of like searching for the Van Halen stuff, and it literally just popped up. So it was the right time. So that happened. And yeah, I'm a tinkerer. I build guitars and stuff. So I'll show you some of the other
Yeah. Show
stuff.
some other ones.
I've got several Wolfgangs, which are cool guitars. I love playing those ones. So I will show you. Oh, let me put this on before it falls off. you can edit this out.
It's cool. All right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, this was cool to do actually. I kind of this happened last year, and in fact, what happened was I was looking for one of these, right,
Right.
in the burl finish. Because I'd bought a Wolfgang before, and I like the guitars, and these go pretty cheap. These are the standards, so these go for like about $300 used in the UK,
Yeah.
right? So I missed out on one of these with the burl finish, so I was like really peeved about it. And then this one came up, and then I kind of recalibrated my thought process as to what I could do, because I'd planned to do the stripes on this, and I'd figured out how to do the translucent stripes.
Hmm.
So I'm sitting there, kind of licking my wounds, and it's like, I missed out on the damn guitar. And this one comes up, this black fade one. So I was like, you know what? I can do something cool with that. So I bought this one. I kid you not, that evening, this one comes up.
Of course.
I'm like, damn. So I was like, what do I do now? I was like, you know what? Just buy it. Just get
Right.
the
Right.
second guitar as well. So I ended up with two, and I striped them both, and then made this one the 5150 guitar, and this one the 1984. So
That's cool though. That's good. That's a great. A lot of people do like what they would consider like their version of whatever.
right,
Their kind of customized version of the Van Halen thing, but not the Van Halen thing.
yeah,
Not the real, not exact. Like we do replicas, right? But then there's this. You do these sort of things that are like spin-off versions of what might have happened.
exactly. Yeah, what would happen if Jay spec'd out a Wolfgang guitar? What would I want it to look like? Well, I
Right.
want it to look like this. So
Right. Right.
then, because I have the skills to do this and stuff, and
Right.
because I've been building guitars and stuff for years, it's like, okay, so if Jay wants a version of that, why doesn't Jay just do it?
Right, right, right. Get one of your Spirit Dance guitars down that you've done a lot of modifications to that you built, and show
Oh, yeah.
people some of this carving and stuff you've done, because it's a really interesting. Obviously you can do this stuff here, but I want them to see what you do with these other things.
Sure. Actually, with the carving stuff, I'll show you another guitar which I actually put together from parts, which is my N4.
Right,
Uh,
right. Wow.
I
Yeah.
actually found the body and neck on eBay, I think a year after I did the Frankie guitar.
Wow.
And so I decided to kind of like, I don't know if you can see that in the middle.
Yeah. How did you carve that?
I routed it out with Dremel,
Okay.
and did the whole Nuno thing on there and stuff.
Right.
And then did the burning and stuff, which is kind of a signature of my Spirit Dance guitars, which I'll show you in a second.
Okay.
And then my friend Stefan over in Germany, he CNC'd these carbon fiber pieces, the N4,
Wow.
and did that. And then, the back is kind of all customized and stuff. Says get the funk out and stuff. And,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a big thing. We all kind of spun off of Eddie's influence with our DIY modifications, and I had
absolutely.
Amanda on here, Peters, and she's doing the sort of the same thing, but with paint. More of a paint thing, and
Right.
yeah, and everybody's kind of gotten into what Eddie did to us. He just made us go full on art with our guitars.
Definitely. And it was about just personalizing it. And
Sure.
it's a cool skill to have. Yeah, it's great like going and buying a guitar. I still, I have plenty of guitars, but every time a new guitar turns up, it's like, it's Christmas Day all over again, and your birthday kind of like on top of it. It's you just get that feeling because it's new. And yeah, as musicians, we want to experience everything in the candy store. We want to try one of everything. It doesn't matter that we've had like our belly full of it.
Well, doesn't it? But this is like the excuse I always use with my wife, which Darla, is like when you pick up a new instrument, you spend time with that instrument, and then new things that you write happen, new parts that you'd never. It's like, how does that happen? Like every guitar has a song in it or a
Yeah,
melody in it.
absolutely, because it inspires you in a different way, because it takes you in a different direction. I know when I picked this up, I'm thinking kind of, Nuno. I'm thinking extreme. I want to play some, funk metal type of stuff, and I play differently on this than I play on the Frankie or the Wolfgangs or some of my other
Right.
guitars. It's it is the interesting thing about guitars, over the last year or so, 2 years actually, almost 2 years, I've gotten into PRS guitars, and also I have a Sterling Luke guitar,
Yeah, I saw
which
that.
daily drivers, right? And
Right.
they make me play in a completely different way.
Right. Just
They,
the feel of the neck, the profile, the whole thing it affects you.
yeah, absolutely. And this, I pick this up pretty much every single time I can. If I can, every video I do, if I can like put this into my videos now, this gets in there, and my PRS guitars, which are like cased up in the other room because
So
they're
just so everybody knows, your channel is you do a lot of gear demos of all
yep,
types of gear. Um, you do a lot of original compositions to showcase the gear.
yes,
And so there's a lot of material that you guys can check out on Jay's channel. A lot of Van Halen material too, as well. But a whole, you've been doing this for how long?
um, I'm in year number 11 now, I think.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been on YouTube for a long time, man.
Isn't that crazy? So it's crazy. Yeah. Well,
Um,
like you're saying about guitars, I want to show you something that I
yeah,
got that's new that makes me play different. You ready?
yeah, I'm totally ready, man.
I'm unveiling. Here it
Oh,
comes.
I saw that headstock earlier on. That is so cool, man. That's sick. That's awesome.
Yeah. Another black and
I've
white
got to
guitar that's cool.
I've got to show you my V guitar actually then,
Yeah.
because my buddy Dan and I did a guitar swap some years ago, and he got one of my Spirit Dance guitars, which
Oh
he
yeah.
really liked, which was a Telecaster. It was a Super Strat Telecaster type of thing with dual humbuckers and all this cool switching and stuff, and it had this finish on it, which was like a piece of snakeskin over the top
Oh.
and stuff. So, but we did a swap, and let me get this.
Oh yeah. I've seen that. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that. It's cool.
Which is a 2006 Flying V,
Wow. That's
but
beautiful.
I don't remember the guy's name, and I was talking to Dan about this literally just yesterday. But the guy just went to town on this, and he does these like crazy modifications with all this steel cutouts and stuff. Um,
That's amazing looking.
it's a great guitar, and the thing is, I didn't realize that Ed actually used a V on some of his recordings and
Yeah.
stuff.
Sure. Yep.
In my
Yep.
mind, it was either the Kramer or the Frankenstrat or something like that. But obviously, there was a whole slew of different guitars, like the Ripley and the Flying V and stuff like that, and for different tones and things. But yeah, they're cool to have. But I love the black and white finish. I was looking at that headstock earlier when we were talking.
Knuckle-
That's a Schenker guitar, man.
Schenker, yeah. I was a big Schenker fan too. In the early days of Van Halen, they would open up for Michael Schenker, and and Schenker has spoken about that a little
Yep.
bit because he said that when he'd heard that later, and then he realized that the show that they were telling him about, he didn't really know who they were back then. They were kind of a new band that was coming up. They weren't even big yet. So he was, he remembers it, but it's like so far back in his history but then he realized that he, had been on the bill with Van Halen early on
Right.
and quite unique players. I mean, Schenker brings a whole different vibe to the whole thing. But yeah, Ed and those kind of players, like we were talking about Nuno a while ago off camera, and Ed's influence on all those players, it's amazing all that. So when you go back to like the albums, you were telling me, and you had actually put this on your channel that you had
Mhm.
spent what a week or two listening to all the albums again from back to front.
No, it was actually over two flights.
Okay.
So I went on vacation about a month back, right? And what happened was on the flight over, I
Mhm.
usually kind of have my iPad loaded up with loads of movies, so I watch movies on the plane.
Right.
So it was an early start for us. We're taxiing to the runway, and I put my earbuds in, and I just thought I'd snooze for a bit. So I'm snoozing and stuff, and I'd loaded up all the Van Halen albums on my phone so I could listen to, just some music while I was doing it. So instead of watching a movie, I started listening to music. Anyways, I'm kind of falling asleep a little bit. So this turns into 5 hours of snoozing and basically listening to Van Halen back to back for that whole flight. So I got through the whole Roth era, and then I was touching on the Sammy Hagar era as well. And then on the flight back, I decided to do the same thing. So for the rest of the catalog, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And it was just an amazing experience to go through it all, because I've listened to all of the albums, but it's been a few years, and I hadn't really absorbed all of the material. I knew the hits, but the deeper cuts, the songs which, aren't talked about regularly, like, Jump and Panama and Hot for T-shirt and things like that, they were somewhere in the back of my mind. I'd heard them, but I'd forgotten them, and I was rediscovering them and stuff. And that was a really amazing thing, kind of listening to all of that material and so intensively and stuff, and just hearing the progression and the evolution of the band as it went through, kind of like
Right, because you listen to it as a chronological listening
yeah,
from the bottom.
absolutely. Yeah, and I wanted to do it like that, to do it chronologically, so that I had a mental history of like what Eddie's music was and how it progressed. That it was fascinating. For the first thing that fascinated me was, like, I got to Van Halen 2, and as soon as I heard the guitar tone, it's like the guitar tone's slightly different. And I know I've heard this, and I've probably noticed it a little bit in the past, but to that extent, when you're kind of like semi-conscious and all your senses are just focused on the music, right? It's the experience is just that much more intense. So I'm loving the tone on the second album. Then Women and Children First. Then I was just like, holy crap, this is my favorite Van Halen tone now. And I'd always like deferred back to that first album, the debut album, as my favorite Van Halen tone. And there's that guilty feeling. It's like I'm cheating on that first album now. Sorry, Ed.
Right. Well, he didn't like it either. You remember you mentioned that, I think, in your video that you did on this, because Jay did
Yeah.
a video about this trip he did, and the realizations about the different albums. And you had mentioned that Ed even said he didn't like the tone on the first album, that he, you know,
It, there's too much reverb on it, and when you could go back and listen, and I was reading the books at the time as well. I was reading
right.
Eruption by Chris Gill and Brad Tolinsky, which I've got right here,
Mhm.
and so I was reading that as well. So it was putting everything into context as well.
Mhm.
So all of this became like not just a listening experience, but it became a movie in my head, because I understood why there was an evolution, why the tone changed. And Ed didn't actually like the tone because, like, Ted Templeman had put the reverb on. The reverb was on there for a reason. It doubled up the guitars. It made it quite kind of like quite a
Spatial.
live sound and
Yeah,
spatial and stuff.
spatial, yeah.
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 But as you progress through and you listen to like Women and Children and even Diver Down and also, Fair Warning, right? You just hear that punch of that Marshall. There's this kind of like real immediacy to it. And you hear the growl of it, and you understand what, the amp was on the edge of kind of like, its capabilities and stuff, and just, or being pushed to the limits of its capabilities, I should say.
Yeah, when we think about that amp, and how he resculpted all of our perception of what we know as the Brown sound. But we for me, Jay, when I go back to the early days, it was so hard to get this kind of sound anyway. And because he did turn it all the way up, and then later used a variac, and kept, then as we progressed, we have preamp, built in, and we have pedals in front. And
Right.
it more or less, this progression that Ed started pushed all of amplification in a different direction. Obviously with the raw material, the plexi was there, there in a way if you turned it all the way up. But as we knew, even he had trouble in the clubs back then dealing with that. Obviously, he was getting thrown out of, like, they got thrown out of, what was it, Gazaris or whatever. Every time they did an audition, it was too loud or whatever, and he kept having to deal with this problem that he eventually turned into this benefit that turns out to be the sound that we all love, and that transmits into so many different amplifier types, whether it's a Soldano or a or whatever. There's that discussion about the Soldano circuit being very similar to the EVH 5150.
Yeah, yeah. The
Okay.
5150 was actually modeled. The original one was actually modeled on the Soldano because
So
he was 91. He when he did Carnal Knowledge, he used Soldanos on that, and then it basically progressed. That PV was obviously building an amp for him, and they basically tore apart an SLO, which would be sacrilege now,
right,
obviously.
right, right.
But they modeled it on that, and they were basically trying to create a version of that, and
But
then
what's funny when you think about that
yeah,
is that had Edward not pushed the amplifier so hard
yeah,
and was searching for this sound, the Soldano would have never existed because there would have never been a desire to have that,
exactly,
right?
yeah.
Preamp gain.
Yeah, it's that evolution which happened as a result of so many things, when we think about just the guitar, the Superstrat thing. And he talks about this a lot in the books, where Ed was pretty pissed off that everybody started copying his guitars and even put his name on certain stuff, even though he hadn't endorsed it in the early days and stuff. But that whole thing about the Superstrat, if you kind of like do search the listings pre 1978, 77, right, you're not going to find kind of like a strat shaped guitar with a humbucker, which was stock,
Right.
in the bridge position. It just didn't happen. If you wanted a humbucker in the bridge, you went and bought a Gibson Les Paul. That's just the way it was. It
Or a
was the
Fender.
law.
If you want a Fender, you got the single coils.
Exactly. It's three single coils. Then Ed basically kind of, took probably a screwdriver or a chisel and just like hacked the cavity out, and he did that, and it basically just took off. It made so much sense, but it morphed it into that guitar, which I don't know how many of them now, but they're
Right,
super
right.
strong.
Right.
It,
We're just inundated with Charville and everything that happened after that, Ibanez, whatever, whichever
exactly.
whichever brand you want to talk about. Yeah, the whole thing, in the book that I'm reading, Steve Rosen's book, Tone
Hmm.
Chaser. Um, if you go back far enough with Steve Rosen and his interviews, you'll remember an interview where he was with Eddie and Les Paul together.
Right, right.
Okay? And this is 1980 something rather, I think 80 early 80s. He had Les. This is 85. This is when Les and Eddie were inducted into the Rock Walk.
Oh yeah, right,
Okay, so
right.
he gets them together and they do an interview, but Ed ends up interviewing Les Paul.
Oh, how cool is that?
And in the audio of that, Ed says to him, you know, I wanted what you developed mixed with what Leo developed and the whammy bar. And Les was telling him how much he appreciated Leo and how close friends they were. And, Ed was trying to tell him, like, the Les Paul, they called the SG a Les Paul, right, at one point, right?
Yes.
And Ed's telling him the story of how he cut the horn off the one for the
Yeah, yeah.
recording, right? So all that's in those recordings, but it just goes to show you, like he really loved both aspects, but it wasn't there, and he related that to Les Paul at that time in 1985, which would have been fairly early in that progression, but it was a really interesting moment to hear two guys who innovated so big in the music business come together and talk about the things that you're talking about, where Ed pushed amplifiers and guitars to a new place.
Yeah, totally. And the time was actually really rife for that because a lot of this actually happened out of necessity
Yeah.
because the stuff that you wanted didn't exist. It's one of the reasons I actually started building my own amps as well. It was kind of a few years ago. It was just necessity because I was kind of looking at like amps and stuff, and yeah, you can go out and buy a Marshall Plexi, but it's going to cost you a good few grand for a 1970s Plexi, right?
Right.
I've always wanted to build an amp, so I ended up buying a kit, building my 69 spec 50 watt, which is it's incredibly good. And so it was, again, out of necessity that I did it. And now the great thing about it is I get to like adopt that philosophy of like let me just screw with it. Let me see what I can do with it. So, you know, my Plexi has like a bunch of switches on the front, which actually kind of do different things. Switchable tone stack. I have the fat cap, which is switchable in two positions in there. Um, the uh, the treble the bright caps on both channels,
Hmm.
switchable.
Hmm.
I kind of got that from the Friedman thing, and then I've just installed the Jose clipping diodes in there as well. But I get to do this because that I've always been like this. I've always been a tinkerer. I've always built guitars. I've put them together. I had no idea that Ed did this originally. I had no clue. I basically just did it because back in the day I needed a guitar. I couldn't afford one. So what do I do? I ended up building one. I was kind of lucky because when I was at school, when I was high school, when I was finishing off my final year, my graphical communications teacher, the technical drawing teacher that I had,
Hmm.
um, uh, for the course that I was, to graduate from high school, he, I'd gotten into rock music at the time, and I decided to design a guitar. So one day he says to me, "Well, I built a guitar." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, I could help you build one if you want," because I was going to build a scale model, and he said, "You could build a full size one." So I end up building a full size guitar, and then it just, it gives you a skill which you just then take, and it's exciting to do because everything's possible. It opens up every single possibility because if something doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. You
Right.
just make it.
Right.
You just
Just make
make
it
the
right. That's right. I mean, yeah. Like, I mean, look at the progression of the Floyd Rose and
yeah,
all of that, that happened all around him. I think that's, we obviously the albums are like the bedrock that all of this kind of rose from, as he tinkered and created these amplifier sounds and mangled guitars and did all these things.
yeah,
Eventually it becomes this, the 51, it becomes these guitars on your wall, it becomes the Wolfgangs, it becomes
yeah,
this final kind of idealized version of what he was looking for. And that's such an amazing and inspiring thing about Eddie Van Halen is not only did he record these amazing and write these amazing songs, he changed everything around
yes.
electric guitar I mean, a lot of us understand that, but I don't think that the general public understands how much impact he had on that side of the business.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people won't know that because they're in it for the music.
Right.
You know, we're musicians at the end of the day, right?
Right. Right.
This is what we do. We tinker around with instruments and stuff because it's our passion. But, if you're just buying the CDs or the albums to listen to and just enjoy, then all of that technical detail isn't necessarily relevant to life. It might be interesting, but it's a footnote, right? For
Right.
us, if somebody starts talking to me about like the spec of Ed's amps and the tolerances and how the couple of the resistors had kind of drifted to 1.1K from 820 ohms and stuff, I'm kind of like this.
Right.
I'm just like I'm totally fascinated by that stuff because it's something which I do. It makes me want to kind of go and tinker with my amp.
Yeah. Yeah. When I built that replica back here, which
Yeah,
I had built one back years and years ago before there was any kind of online information. I bought like an online book of how to do paint
right.
jobs. Right. And and I managed to pull it off, and I had no clue what I was doing. I was totally never done it.
Yeah,
But then when I, wanted to do another one, I wanted to this in 2020, obviously, after he passed. I wanted to do kind of like the most accurate version I could, and go all the way with it. Now that I had the tools and the resources online to really get forensic about the detail, but the experience of going out there in the garage with sandpaper, man, and
oh
starting out
yeah, yeah,
with
absolutely.
that would thing, with no sealer on the wood and having to do the entire sealing and all the sanding you do and then all the prep. It's quite a process. Or anybody who's never done that, it's
Funny story.
go
I
ahead.
I probably ended up like poisoning myself sometimes because I used to do that in my bedroom. I used to like spray guitars and shit in my bedroom,
Wow. Wow.
which was
Yeah.
kind of. And now I think back at it, and I'll show you a guitar in a second, which has a little story behind it. But yeah, now I think back and it's like, holy shit, dude, that's kind of dangerous.
Right. Right. Yeah. You go through this process and you kind of live in Ed's shoes for a minute.
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing that he really kind of taught us from that is everything's possible.
Right.
It's just dependent on your vision and your willingness to try something. And it's that childlike fascination. When you're a kid,
Mhm.
you want to kind of just experience everything. And he was like that throughout his lifetime. He was still experimenting. He was still kind of just trying things out. And I think that's the thing that I really picked up and over the last like year or so when I've been diving into the Van Halen stuff again. That's the thing that's really caught me. It's that playfulness, it's that joy of doing this. And we can all do it with whatever we do, whether it's kind of like with guitars, music, amps, cars, whatever your particular passion is. But it's staying in that kind of like energy of feeling like there's something new, or feeling fascinated.
Mhm.
Over the years, once you run a YouTube channel for long enough, at some stage somebody will come up and say, "Hey, cut your hair and get a real job."
Right. Right. Right.
But my reaction to that has always been, well, I have a real job, and why would I come here? I'm having too much damn fun doing this. I've actually managed to do this, and I'm going to stay here doing this because, damn, it's a blast. It's like being a kid all the time. Yeah, sure. I have responsibilities. I take care of those responsibilities. I'm an adult when I need to be, but then when I'm indulging in my passion, which happens to be my work as well, then hey, I'm gonna channel some of that Eddie Van Halen energy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's what, you just said. It was a great way to say that anything's possible. And like you mentioned him being having a childlike innocence in his approach. People actually and said, I don't know if it's on some of the books, uh, some of the interviewers had mentioned that he had this childlike enthusiasm as a young adult.
Right?
And I think we would see this in his face and the way that he moted on stage. And this became what we visually, our visual cues for his love for what he did. Like when he had the guitar, man, he was, the Mr. Smiley we know, but
Absolutely.
every bit of that was real though, and he never pretended. It was who he was.
Yeah, yeah. And everybody's got the opportunity to be like that. I lots of people kind of ask me how I'm kind of like all smiley and happy all the time. It's just the way I am. I think I've always kind of like just been in that energy of kind of just enjoying what's here. Well, for the last like maybe like 6, 7, 8 years,
Mhm.
certainly, yeah. And life's had its challenges, and yeah, life's been kind of crappy sometimes. And you deal with it, and then you move on. But then, in order to move forward, you can still smile. We've got a choice. I can wake up tomorrow morning, right, and see the grey sky and say, oh, that's it. The day's gone. It's just going to be a crappy day because the sky's grey. Or I can say, you know what? I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to go into the studio. I know I'm going to go into the studio. I'm going to pick up a guitar. I'm going to play some music. I'm going to make a video or whatever. I'm just going to enjoy myself.
Mhm.
But that's a choice I make. And that's why I smile so much, I guess,
Well,
because
yeah, the Eddie, it was a very difficult interpersonal thing with all the other members of the Van Halen band originally. Well, obviously with Roth, and
yeah,
he had his struggles with those kind of things, interpersonal relationships. We all do, but he never struggled with his guitar.
no,
His
no,
guitar was, one of the things I learned about him, in Chris and Brad's book, Eruption. They obviously uncovered this part of him, but it's been told that he was like all of us who started with a guitar in their bedroom, kind of by themselves, not necessarily a social outcast, but someone who found an instrument and a passion that they wanted to be by themselves, learning to be good at that.
Yeah.
And I when I went, you go back with Eddie, it was really extreme. Like we talk about as young players spending 8 hours a day in your room or whatever in your studio, working on your craft to the point where you can be out with a band or whatever. Um, but yeah, that he did that too. And I guess when I think back about my childhood, I didn't know that he did that. I didn't know that's how he did what he did. But later
Right.
in life, I realized, oh, he's did it exactly like everybody else does it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember Zach Wilde talking about it as well, where he said, you look at Zach Wilde when he's on stage with Ozzy, even when he initially hit the stage with Oz, and you'd think, wow, this guy had it. Where he must have been kind of like you know, the class favorite at school and stuff. No, no, he was stuck in his bedroom for 3 hours, every day, 3, 4 hours, kind of practicing guitar and stuff. He was, the awkward kid and stuff. And you kind of realize that there are a lot of parallels, and that solitude actually kind of that we had and which Ed had basically made him the player that he was because he spent so much time actually, learning his craft.
Right.
Trying to trying to play the music he loved, which was obviously bands like with Eric Clapton and Tony Iommi and things like that. And initially he wanted to be that, and then he found his voice within all that music and stuff. And that's how it works for us, even though we learn music by other artists and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It actually just we're learning from masters.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I always put it. I'm a guitar teacher as well, and a music teacher and a music coach, which I've done for almost 20 years now. And the one thing I've learned is, you know what? If you want to learn from a musician, go and learn from him. Learn it verbatim, because you know what? It'll teach you something. When I deep dive into a player, like I've been deep diving into Van Halen, I notice that when I do solos now, that there's a little bit of Eddieism which goes into my solos, and
Sure.
it makes me smile and it makes it feel fresh. I picked up the guitar in like 1989, which is it's quite a while back, 36 odd years ago or something like
Right.
that.
Right. Right.
But it still feels fresh because I'm learning something new and it's taking me in a direction and stuff. And reading the books was interesting because right throughout his life, that's what Eddie was doing. He was constantly kind of like just discovering new things. Eventually had the guitar company and the amp company, and he started building the guitars, and then the 5150 amps. The series which is being distributed by Fender and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a penny drop moment with those because I have an LBX which is just up there. It's an
Yeah. Yeah.
LBXS,
Yeah.
phenomenal amp. I absolutely love it. I bought it recently. Many people don't know about it yet because it's not been on my channel,
Oh, is it the
but it will
stealth?
be.
It's the
um,
stealth one though, right?
it's the stealth one, yeah. It's the little one. I'll grab it in a second.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
kind of like. I know the 5150 was adopted by a lot of the very very high gain players.
Right.
I never understood why those amps had so much gain in comparison to everything else.
Mm.
Then a couple weeks ago, I was playing through this and the penny just dropped. It was like, this makes complete sense. We're talking about a player who had an amp where everything was turned up to 10, right? That was his sound. If he needed a cleaner sound, he just turned his guitar volume down.
Right.
I thought, that's what the red channel is. Yeah, you can switch into it, but you know what? If you want to back off, you just turn down your guitar volume. It's complete enough to utter sense. Mind blown.
Right. 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 And then that's what I thought too was like, it becomes adopted by the metal community and becomes sort of the amp there. But when you think about where he came from and what he was trying to achieve, which is essentially the plexi thing but lower volume,
Right.
the progression's pretty obvious to how we end up to where we end up today.
Yeah.
We now we can do all of this stuff with a mate like your TR THR your THR right
Yeah.
there, right? Yeah. your Yamaha. I have the THRX and the newer 31.
Yep.
And what they sound like at amazingly low volumes is this massive amp that Chris cranked on 10. And that was
Yep.
something that, can you imagine, dude? The Yamaha sounds at a lower volume like the Plexi sounded
Yeah.
great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it
And
has the characteristics of the sustain and compression
exactly.
that his playing um, style was almost dictated by. Like what I think about, okay, if I'm playing that Plexi on 10 back in the day, that compression that happens between your hands and your fingers, in order to get the kind of vibe you get from a new EVH amp, you really got to be up there with that to get that kind of hard compression
Absolutely.
that you get,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. And then you get the feedback from the speaker and everything, which is kind of probably what a lot of people don't experience because where can you play 100 watt plexi on 10?
right,
We don't have stadiums in our backyards, right?
right,
So, it's an incredibly loud amp.
right.
And, I've stood in front of like a fully cranked 100 watt previously, when I've been on stage. And it's an experience and a half, and certain things happen. You get more gain, you get more feedback. You get the pinch harmonics are easier, and it's simply because of volume effect, the effect of the speaker, everything kind of like working in synergy with each other. It's this feedback loop between everything, between guitar player, pickup, amp, speaker, then back into guitar player, pickup, amp, etc., etc.
But when he came around, that was the only way to achieve this.
Yeah,
And then as he encountered trouble with, like I said, where he was using the Bandmaster instead of his Marshall, um, he had to figure out a way. And we were just talking about how he would always figure out a way. He would say, "Okay, well, how am I going to achieve this and still have what I want
right.
that makes me me and what I play?"
Yep.
And that evolution, not only from the gear standpoint, but as he changed as a player,
Yep.
over through the Sammy era, as things became with the wide, wet, dry, wet, and all those different things, his playing even kind of morphs as he goes.
Yeah, yeah, it evolves, it changes, and it's something that just naturally happens to us as human beings.
Right.
We were talking about this earlier. My early days, I was big, into George Lynch, and that was my thing.
Right.
But now I'm a different person. I've kind of like, I feel it in my music. I discovered who I was as a guitar player, who I was as a musician, and what my voice was on guitar, and it was this combination of everybody. It was a little bit of this guy and a little bit of this guy and a little bit of like this guy and then that guy, and then it's like, oh, how did that guy kind of come into it? It just That's what makes us as
Oh, for sure.
musicians, you
Yeah,
know.
I was gonna say something about the back when I was doing a cover of one of Lynch's solos, which was the Hunter.
Mhm.
I went to your video on it to watch how you attacked it, right? Okay.
Right.
And so every player, as they're working on their vocabulary, they come up with a specific way of playing certain phrases.
Yep.
Because we could play these phrases in multiple positions. And when I was watching you and I was watching other people, what I'm looking for is what is the easiest way to incorporate the way that I would normally approach that lick or that note sequence, I guess, the note sequence. And how can I make that sound exactly like it sounded, yet do it the way that my hands know the best?
Yep.
And so I would like look at your video and go, okay, Jay does it like that, but that other way he does it, I can't feel it. It's not me.
Yep.
I've never played like that way that you do that in that position. So
Right.
what I do is I'd go, okay, well, there's the notes, but where would I have played that normally? And what position? And then I
Yep.
would slowly take a tapestry of you and other people and kind of build my own approach to set of that set of notes and that solo until I had it. It's still the notes. It's just a different position.
Absolutely.
It's the one that my hands most readily would be able to quickly remember and
Yep.
then replicate. And you would see that with like Ed too. When Ed I still see this. This is funny, man. And it's probably going to get on the internet, and I'm going to get in trouble for this.
Whoa,
I'm not
whoa,
going to say who this is. I'm just going to say, okay.
sorry, you can tell me. We won't tell
No,
anyone, dude.
no. One time, I was watching somebody play one of Van Halen's licks, and this person made a direct comment about how not to play this, and I thought he must have seen me play it online because I was the only person that played it like that. You know what I mean? And I guess I knew it was wrong, but it's just the way I always played it. And then I would watch his videos, and then I would realize, hey, he's not playing it all right either.
Right.
Like I watch Eddie play it, and then I watch him play it. I'm like, nope, that's not how it goes, because that's the thing though about Eddie is like we all hear that sequence of notes a certain way,
Yep.
and when you watch Eddie play it, you're like, I haven't seen anybody play that like that except him.
Yeah.
I mean, the example I'm going to give you is it's real simple, and I only noticed this in the last 5 years. At the
Uh-huh.
end of Running with the Devil, the solo,
Yep.
a little da da da, the end. Watch Eddie Van Halen play that on the Jimmy Kimmel live performance.
Uh-huh.
There's a shot where it's right under his hand, and you can see him, and his fingers never move when he does this.
Huh.
So a lot of people you'll see play it, they go da 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 or da da da. Eddie Van Halen never moves from his position.
Huh.
And so I'm watching it going, how is he doing that? I'm hearing that 3-note sequence that everybody comes up with this version of it that they do, right? But he's not moving at all. And so the best I could figure is that it's double stops. And I don't know whether he's just holding the double stops and bending them or what, but watch that. And
Yeah.
anybody that's watching this, watch it. There's
Yep.
there's a great video. I don't know if I ever sent it to you, Jay, but it was it's a video on YouTube. It's called Day at the Office, Eddie Van Halen 2012, Day at the Office. I encourage anybody who's a player to go on and watch this video of Eddie Van Halen in 2012 because the guy that filmed it filmed his hands the entire show.
Oh, wow.
And
Cool.
it's all close-ups on his hands. And what's amazing is to watch him play something like the solo to Out of Love.
Yep.
And he plays it actually still pretty close, even in 2012. And to watch how he fingered those parts. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow. My mind is like, you know how it is when you watch somebody play something and you go,
Yeah.
I actually finger it more like that. So
Right.
now I can see how to go attack it.
Yeah.
Right? To how to, like I was saying, take what fits your hand and what you're used to and make it work for you.
Definitely.
But like on this particular video, you can watch Eddie all night play every lick,
Wow.
like right on his fingers.
Oh my goodness.
Day at the Office, EVH, Day at the Office. It's in Chicago, I think, in 2012. It's the most amazing video if you want to see Ed play things.
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
and it's also amazing, like when you watch other people interpret those parts and you go, they're hearing it a certain way and they're interpreting that a certain way. And maybe it is actually note correct, but in the way that he actually fingers that part
Correct. Yeah.
is unique to him. And that what I found out by watching the video is like, why have we all been playing these licks and he's still playing it different than all of us?
Yeah. Yeah.
We've had access to videos from him for a while now. It's not like we hadn't had access to watch him play these parts, but yet for some reason we all kind of miss parts that he did.
Absolutely. But it's I always liken music to a language.
Right.
It would be kind of like me saying to you, Jeff, let's swap accents. So me do an Alabama accent, you do a British accent.
right.
We're kind of awkward.
Right.
We're
Because it's
speaking
not
the same language, but we the way we speak is slightly different. We still get to the same end result, but that's what I was talking about earlier. We find our own voice within that when we kind of start changing the position we play in, the fingering we play in, and stuff, because it works for us. And then suddenly, you're kind of it's reminiscent of your heroes and your musical influences, but it's not an exact copy of it.
sure.
It's an interpretation of it.
That's what Ledge always said, about his style is that he couldn't copy anybody. He didn't have for some reason, he just wasn't good at copying other people. And if
Right.
you watch him play other people's songs, you can see how he's not. I mean, that's just not his strong point.
Yeah.
But what came out of that was this unique approach to the instrument
Right.
that we you and I know, how he would approach certain things. Um, and in a way, I find George a little easier to interpret than Eddie for me
Right.
personally. I mean, I don't know. It depends on which way your fingers will fall.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
know,
think uh, with Eddie, the code is starting to decode in my head. You know, just by it's more by osmosis than anything else. It's because I'm kind of like in the um, I'm listening to the music, I'm watching the videos, I'm learning the songs. Last week was a perfect example, right? Two of my students, both of them wanted to learn Van Halen songs, so I ended up, going through Drop Dead Legs
mhm,
and Dance the Night Away,
right,
right? Which
right,
I've kind of like tinkered around with a tiny bit, just scratching the surface here and there, but
right.
nothing major. Last week it was like, okay, I had to intensely go into it. And I had the most fun time because I'm learning something new,
Mhm.
and it taught me something, not just about the playing, but also the sound. And then, I'm listening to the solo at the end of Drop Dead Legs. I'm like, you trying to be Alan Holdsworth here or something?
Right, exactly.
Which was kind of like it was a surprise, yeah, because uh, that style of music, Ed was very capable of playing it, but when you listen to the other solos on that same album, they're not like that. They're more kind of like almost composed, right?
Mhm. Right.
This one was kind of like very very free and stuff. So you learn all of this stuff, and then as you go through it, you kind of just start to adopt little bits and pieces and influences from it all and stuff, which is the fun part of music. It's about actually continuing to grow. It's why I feel that being a musician it's a phenomenal place to be because you can actually grow every single day. You can expand your knowledge about gear, your playing abilities, etc., etc., and there's no end point. It's not like we're going to get to the end of the year and it's like, yeah, I've arrived, yay, I'm a
Right.
musician.
Right. I'm the greatest.
Yeah,
I
exactly. It's like,
finally did it. I got the gold medal.
yeah, totally. There is no
Time to
golden medal.
retire. Right,
Yeah,
right. Well, that's the thing about music. It really is. It's a lifetime thing. Not Ed, but Les Paul. Played till he was in his 90s.
yeah, completely. Yeah,
I mean, maybe he
absolutely.
couldn't have played as fluidly as he'd like to have played, but he was still expressing himself on a guitar.
Yeah, totally.
He was getting a chance to interact with players and still be part of music for as long as he lived, almost.
I think he saw that we saw that with Eddie as well. I think with the progression of albums,
Yeah,
his playing did change,
yeah.
but it was just a different. I guess this is going back to the point which you were making earlier, which I kind of like. I took the scenic route to answer this question,
No,
but you see the progression and the evolution in him as a person as well. He was in a different place, so the music changed. It morphed. He went back to wanting to play keyboards and wanting to have synths on what he was doing. It was a
yeah.
skill that he had before he was a guitar player.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so he wanted to bring that back into it. And I think he did it to great effect. I like to listen to the progression in a musician as well because I like new stuff. As much as I love the early albums,
Mhm.
right? If there were 12 of the same album continually,
Mhm.
right? Just churning it out. I know by the second or third album, I'm going to be bored. I'm not going to buy the rest.
Right, right.
Is
Because you've heard it. Yeah, it's all you've already learned and
exactly.
and been able to absorb what it is that person does.
Yeah,
We can name some of those people who are
we
amazing, who are amazing musicians who don't really seem to have. Maybe they peaked and they don't really grow any further.
right.
I mean, that's possibly where they're at, or they
Yeah.
don't want to grow anymore. They want to keep their style the way it is. I mean, I get it. And you know, if say somebody like Iron Maiden, who I love
Yep.
intensely, uh, you know, they do try to do different things, but they're sort of this style that they have created, and people kind of expect that,
Yep.
and they don't want them to go too far, you
Oh,
know.
absolutely. No, because it will just veer off too much from Iron Maiden, which is why, when Bruce went off and did like Skunk Works and his different projects and just being Bruce Dickinson, he
Right.
could venture into whatever areas. Same with Adrian Smith when he did Adrian Smith and Project, and also the other stuff that he did. There's some stuff in there which you would not expect. Like you would never want it on an Iron Maiden album because it just wouldn't be Iron Maiden.
Yeah, I just heard that Kotzen and Adrian Smith
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
It's good,
right, right, right.
different. It's not Iron Maiden, and Adrian's singing on it, which is amazing.
Have you ever heard like Adrian Smith and Project?
I haven't heard that.
90 See if you can dig that up. It's an incredibly cool album,
Wow,
but it's not what you'll expect
from that,
at all.
from him,
And
right?
it's I I tracked down a copy last year on CD, and it cost me a pretty penny to be perfectly honest, because they're quite rare now. But I think you can find the songs on YouTube and stuff. And when he left Iron Maiden, it was because he wanted to kind of venture out and do these different things, but within the confines of Iron Maiden, he just couldn't do it.
Right, right.
His capabilities as an artist and a guitar player are just phenomenal. They're off the scale, you
Right.
know.
Right, but yeah,
Uh,
but yet inside Iron Maiden, he has a job to do there
he has a job to do.
that it fits. Yeah, and
Totally.
and I always, I don't think him and Dave Murray got a lot of credit as guitar players in the
Oh my
early
goodness.
days.
They were my first two heroes as guitar players.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be doing any of this if it wasn't for Iron Maiden.
I tell
Hardly.
you what, there was a accessibility thing for guitar, like when I first started, where it was like, first of all, I got to be able to play the song to enjoy, to get started. So it was Paranoid. That was the song, something to
Yep.
start with, something that gave me bar chords and fifth chords and introduced me to the basics of playing these riffs and being able to physically do that, right? And then you kind of move from that to the next thing, you Smoke on the Water or whatever,
Yep.
and you slowly build up your vocabulary and your chops. And then you graduate. You get to the Van Halen. You can finally play some easy Van Halen, or you can get your hands around it. But for me, like Scorpions and Iron Maiden had songs that allowed me to get my hands to action and actually be producing something that's on a record that I could get inspired by. And as I progressed through each artist, I was able to kind of up the ante as my chops got better to challenge myself and grow, as you said earlier. As we went through, I'm sure that Ed went through the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're never born like, just the finished product. We basically kind of, we start off with a foundation, and some people just have a really much stronger foundation and they're able to progress much quicker.
Right.
But we all start off with a foundation and then we build on that,
Yeah.
we keep building on that. And that's what, makes us the players we are.
Let me ask you a question about these books too, because we were talking about it a minute ago when we were offline. Um, you were talking about obviously Eruption, which you'd read, and you read the No Monk book, Run with the Devil.
Yep.
Very, very different approaches to the story, right?
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you read Greg's book yet?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay.
I've got it here.
Yeah,
That's
and again, another very different version, not version, but approach to the story. So
yeah.
Greg's tact is that it's early days influences. He's drawing from interviews of over 250 people who talk about the entire story around the early days of Van Halen, right? A lot of people that have been on the show. And really Greg has been a source that's always helped me attain some of those guests and keep me focused on that early days.
Cool.
Second story Eruption's more like the meat and potatoes of all of Ed's life. And then Old Monk's book, which is kind of like the behind the scenes, as it says, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay. So this one of the things I want to ask you about with Noel's book, you had mentioned this as we were talking offline about how he interjects what it's like to be a manager and to understand the business of music.
Yeah.
I thought the book was a really good study in the business of music.
Yeah.
and with a band like Van Halen, where you're dealing with super amazing stories of business, like the merch thing, where they were
Merch. That's exactly.
created that business. That was one of the first independent. Now they still do now today. I think it's farmed out a little bit more, but they owned everything under that. In fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, in the book they say they didn't make very much on the shows because of the production costs, but they made money on the merchandise every night to
Yes.
amazing numbers, if I remember right.
Yep.
So, what did you think of that book, and those things in particular?
The merchandising thing was interesting because it had echoes of Star Wars, you know,
Right.
because none of the companies wanted any of the merchandising stuff, and that was kept by I forget his name now. George, what's his name?
George Lucas.
George Lucas. That's him. Yeah, that's the fella.
Right. George.
It was because we were talking about George Lynch. That's why I got confused. I'm
Right.
sorry.
Yeah, I guess you missed that.
George Lucas, right? He kept merchandising right. That's where he made an enormous amount of money because the merchandising rights were still in his hands. Nobody wanted to build the toys and stuff. So it made complete sense that they did that from a business perspective to get their merch out, and it just sells at shows. People want it. They're in the energy of it, and they're going to buy it and stuff. The book was really interesting, I found, because the thing is, you've been a musician for years. You've played like lots of shows and stuff. I've toured a little bit in my time, not majorly or anything like, but a couple times around the UK and stuff. Right? Stuff happens on the road. I
Right.
can only imagine. I've seen like echoes of what I saw in the book happen on the road on even a smaller scale with smaller bands and stuff. So you can imagine how it happens with much bigger bands, and it's raw and it's in your face and kind of lifts the veil a little bit on the kind of the image of our heroes and stuff. But these are real people as well. They have like real emotions. They're on the road for so long. It's tough, man. I remember touring around the UK for like a week or 10 days or 12 days or whatever it was, right? I wanted to get back home. I wanted to get back to my bed. I wanted, just to go to the bathroom, and I wanted to eat when I wanted to. There are all of these little things which you don't factor into it, which actually cause stress. And if you're on the road for the best part of a year, yeah, it's going to get stressful and things are going to happen. Things are going to get said and stuff. But I think it was touched on in Eruption as well a little bit, just how life was very real for these guys. Outside of being a band and musicians and a guitar hero, they were real people. They had emotions to deal with and stuff. And it made it more real for me. It really kind of like put it into context about who these people were, their struggles.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
there's a great section in Noel's book that I kind of I think about a lot when I think about Eddie. He's on the road. He's in Europe. He was isolated. He was away from home. He wanted to go home. And Noel kind of takes him aside and says, "You can't right now. We're breaking. This is the time to take advantage of this." And obviously Ed was just probably having a bad couple days. You
yeah.
know, but it just shows you the human side of Edward, and that I like Jazz Obrecht had said on here. About Eddie. He said that he was the most sensitive person he'd ever met, and that he might have picked the wrong job description or wrong vocation, right? To be in a rock band and to be in these stressful and difficult situations when he was such a sensitive person. And you see this in Noel's book. You see the thing that Jazz has talks about. It's right there raw in Noel's book. The thing about Noel's book is it's so raw. It may
Definitely.
not all be exactly true, or maybe his version of it, but I
The
do think you see the human side of that, the difficulties of their stresses and the interpersonal issues.
stuff. I think I picked up from Eruption actually a lot that it wasn't so much that it was because he was a musician and he was in a big band that uh, caused a lot caused all of it. I think that was the major factor.
Sure.
Because also he became a guitar god.
Right.
He was the guy at the top. he was the number one guy. And with that, I can imagine there's a ton of pressure that comes with that, you know.
Sure.
And
Sure.
you know, one of my favorite stories out of all the books is the time he was at the Tool concert
Oh
with.
yeah, I love that.
Can you take a photo of us? Yeah, yeah, sure.
Right. But you know what? All these people that I have interviewed, a lot of them, one of them was a tennis pro, and he was a
Mhm.
guy I met at the Van Halen event when he did the interview at the Smithsonian. I was in line with this guy, and we talked for hours because we were in line together for hours. And turned out he'd been up to 5150, been to the studio, and his connection with him was that he was a tennis professional and he knew one of the producers of something he was working on up there at 5150, got invited up there. But his background's tennis. He's not like some kind of guitar guy. And so Eddie kind of liked it that he was somebody who didn't,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
fawn
definitely.
over him. Like what he said, what's your favorite song of mine? He's like, I don't know too many of your songs, but I guess Beat It. I mean,
Yeah,
and he's like, that's not my song.
they find it really refreshing because it's kind of like, you know, I'm a musician for a living. You know, I teach and I do YouTube and do all this stuff, right?
Right.
On the weekends, I don't do music. I don't go to many gigs because it's, as we say in the UK, it's a busman's holiday. You know, it's basically doing more of the same. I love going to shows and stuff, don't get me wrong, but, you know, you want some time away from it. You want to go and do something slightly different
Right. Yeah.
because
Gotta
that,
balance.
yeah, it's the balance in life and stuff, right? And yeah, it's really refreshing when you kind of like, you know, come across somebody who's talking to you about something which is completely unrelated.
Right.
Becomes interesting, become intriguing and stuff, you know?
Right. Right. Like you said, you're interested in cars, and I kind of got this side kick with the Eddie Van Halen thing because I was so interested in his cars, and,
Right.
and I would like post his cars or whatever. And I posted one of his Lamborghini photos, which are pretty unique. The black Countach he had.
Mhm.
He only had it for a few years, but there's a great photo that I have on my Forever Unchained 1981 Instagram where Eddie's in the car and somebody saw him and he pulled the scissor door up, and it's
Yep.
this great photo. And I say something below it like, "This is the black Countach that he had." And Sammy Hagar comes on my page and goes, "It wasn't black, it was midnight blue." Because Sammy's a
How
big
cool is
car guy,
that?
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He
Yeah.
wanted to straighten me out
There's,
on the
there's
color of the
one
Countach.
funny story about the Lamborghini thing, right? So Panama has been a favorite song, a Van Halen song of mine forever and a day. When I was like 7 years old, right? My uncle, he passed away many, many years ago, right? But he was like my bigger brother, you know, my idol in life. He introduced me to cars. He was a big Ferrari guy,
Okay.
right? He showed me a Countach, and it was like, yeah, that's my car.
Right, right.
All this time I've been listening to like Panama playing it, just loving it, never had a clue that it was about damn car.
Well, yeah, he had the Mura. The Mura was the one on. He had the Mura, and the Mura was the one they backed up.
Yeah.
And the Countach, though, because it was, I remember an article that Ed said it got too expensive or something, and he just pulled the oil out of it and put it up on blocks. I guess he sold it. I'm still trying to figure out where it is. Actually, I've been
Yeah.
going. There's a guy. If you watch this guy's channel on YouTube called Curated, which is a
Oh
wonderful
yeah.
channel. Curated
Yeah.
John. I've been to his shop down there in Miami, and I've been
Oh, yeah.
trying to get, because he's a big Countach collector and kind of he has a whole business around that.
Yep.
Countach's in particular, and I just made them aware. I didn't know whether they were aware of the black one that he had, but Midnight Blue, according to Sammy Hagar, where the thing was. I've heard it's in Japan, and it with a collector there, but it'd be interesting if it ever showed back up because the Countach, of course, was the poster car that we all grew up with. The Miura on the other side was more of a elegant Countach or elegant Lamborghini, and that was the one that he had forever.
Yep.
Even close to his passing, he John and them picked that car up from him
Yep.
when he sold it to them. And then they went and had it restored and were showing it. I think now it owns it. A private collector owns that car, the red Mura. But that was a gift from Valerie for his their their wedding day.
Wow.
It had April 11th on the back of the tag for the day they were marrying.
Damn.
And
Very, very cool.
pretty
Yep.
cool, right? Man, I appreciate you coming. I don't want to keep you. I know you got to do a lesson
No
today and
worries, man.
stuff, but
It's always
man,
a pleasure.
great hanging out with you again and talking. And y'all check
Thank
out,
you for having me on the show, man.
yeah,
No problem.
y'all check out Jay's channel. Tell him again where it is.
It's youtube.com/ at jguitar. That's Jay guitar. And there's a bunch of YouTube stuff on, not YouTube stuff. Of course, there's YouTube stuff. Van Halen stuff on there. I have a Van Halen playlist because I've deep dived into kind of doing the brown sound and, built a Van Halen inspired pedal board recently and stuff. So people dig it, I think. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. So yeah, go over and check it out.
And
Come
check
and hang
out,
out.
yeah. Like I said, Jay's my guru, and if you want to take a lesson from him or anything
It's
like
very
that,
kind.
feel free to touch base with him and check out his channel. And yeah, I tell you what, man. Again, I want to thank you for being the one guy that put his hand out and to help me when I started this
Oh, no.
channel, man. I mean, really, seriously,
Always here for you, man.
you're the guy that did it, and I really appreciate that. And
No worries.
who would have known it'd been all the way from Alabama and England.
I know, right?
It's just so crazy. And to be able to talk to people all around the world and have this connection with people about Van Halen has just been like such a gift to me. And every time I get to do it, man, I get a high from it.
Same here. This is the reason why I'm kind of so into Eddie at the moment because it makes me feel like I'm 16 years old again, picking
Right,
up the guitar for the first time. It's
right.
exciting.
That's what it is. It's exciting. That's what got us into this. That's why we get up every day and still do it. And because of Eddie Van Halen, you and I have these channels where we can share all this with everybody in the world,
Absolutely.
and we can interface with so many different people and grab that inspiration that he gave everyone, and we can keep
Pass it along, right? Yeah,
just
pass it forward.
passing it to the whole world. It's such a that's I think his real gift was his inspiration that he gave people to do it their
Absolutely.
way, to find their own voice, to tinker, to be free, and
Yeah.
anything's
Yep.
possible.
Yep. Just, remember to unplug the amp before you start screwing around inside.
Right. I know what you know what every single episode I do on Van Halen stories, I come up with a title that encompasses the conversation. And I'm gonna let your name is gonna be the one this time. You ready? It's anything is possible. That's what I'm gonna call it.
Fantastic.
Anything is possible. Eddie Van Halen
That's
has showed
perfect,
us
man.
showed us such, and he showed us that you can go from being an immigrant with no money
Yes.
to the top of the heap to totally
Yeah,
innovating the entire world of music in the
exactly.
industry. It's an amazing story. I'm glad you came on today to talk to me about it, man.
You're welcome. Thank you for having
It's
me on.
great to see you again, and I'll see you soon. We always talk in between,
Definitely.
so
Yep.
I appreciate it, Jay.
You're welcome. Most
All
welcome.
right,
Thank you so much for having me on, man.
have a good day and a good lesson, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you later.
See you, buddy. Bye bye.